Manorialism was an economic and social system that shaped rural life in medieval Europe. It was based on the idea that a lord owned a large estate, called a manor, and allowed peasants, known as serfs, to live on and work the land. In exchange for protection and a place to live, the serfs gave part of their crops and labour to the lord. The manor was mostly self-sufficient, meaning almost everything needed was produced on the estate itself. This system created a clear structure where everyone had a role, but also kept people in one place, often for their entire lives. Now let's look at some examples. In a typical manor, there would be farmland, a village for the peasants, a church, and the lord's house. In France, England, and parts of Germany during the Middle Ages, manors became the basic unit of the economy. For instance, an English manor in the 12th century might have supported around 15 families who worked together to grow crops like wheat, oats, and barley. The lord would collect taxes in the form of grain or livestock, and might also demand labour to repair buildings or roads. Each manor worked a little differently, depending on the local climate, customs, and the wealth of the lord. Now let's look at some strengths of manorialism. One strength was its stability. The manor system helped keep order during a time when central governments were weak or often absent. Everyone knew their role, and the system rarely changed from generation to generation. This gave people a sense of predictability and safety. Another strength was how self-sufficient each manor was. Because trade was difficult and dangerous, being able to produce everything locally, like food, tools, and clothing, meant the community could survive even if outside help was unavailable. This made manorialism a practical solution in a time with few roads, little money, and many threats from raiders or rival lords. However, manorialism is not without its weaknesses. One weakness was that it limited personal freedom. Most serfs were not allowed to leave the manor without the lord's permission, and their children often remained serfs too. This meant people had very little chance to improve their lives or move to better places. Another weakness was that it discouraged progress. Because each manor focused on survival instead of growth or innovation, farming methods stayed the same for centuries. Without new ideas or outside influences, manors could become stuck in the past, especially if the soil became poor or the population grew too large for the land to support. Now let's look at some alternatives to manorialism. One alternative was the rise of towns and cities, where people could become merchants, craftsmen, or labourers, and live outside the control of a manor. In these places, people traded goods for money and could move around more freely. Another alternative came later with the growth of a market economy, where landowners began renting land instead of demanding labour. This shift allowed former serfs to become tenant farmers who paid rent, which gave them more freedom and encouraged new agricultural techniques. These changes slowly replaced manorialism and helped Europe transition into the modern age.